In the hidden anatomy of the human being, beyond what the scalpel can dissect and the microscope can measure, there exists a small, soft, and often forgotten organ, the thymus gland. Nestled just above the heart and behind the sternum, its physical presence seems insignificant. It begins to shrink after puberty, as if its role is over once childhood innocence fades. But that very shrinking, is no biological coincidence. It is a symbolic death of intuitive power, a disconnection from the divine authority every human is born with. The thymus is not simply a gland. It is a sealed gateway, a forgotten altar of internal sovereignty, once revered in ancient schools of mysticism, initiation, and theocratic power. In the temples of ancient Egypt, where Thoth's influence was omnipresent, through inscriptions, ritual, and coded architecture, the body was never seen as mere flesh. It was a temple, and within it, certain areas were seen as sacred chambers. The heart was known to be the seat of truth. But the thymus, positioned in the sacred triangle between the heart and the throat, was the energetic governor. The place where feeling, expression, spiritual identity converged. It was associated with the Sahu, the spiritual body, and was seen as the site where divine energy descends into human form. The priests did not speak of the thymus in modern terms. They encoded it in symbols, geometric designs, and metaphors. The scarab beetle, often positioned over the chest in funerary rituals, was more than decoration. It marked the thymic center, signifying transformation, resurrection, and the emergence of higher will from within the body. Modern science defines the thymus gland merely as a component of the immune system, responsible for developing T cells and maintaining biological defense. But this is only the lowest octave of its function. In truth, the thymus is a resonance chamber, a quantum tuner that responds to vibrational frequency. When a child laughs freely, plays with full presence, or sings without fear of judgment, the thymus is highly active. It glows, metaphorically speaking, pulsing life into the body's field. But when fear, shame, or excessive conformity takes hold, this organ begins to shut down. And with it, so does our connection to the divine intelligence that is not external, but vibrationally embedded in the flesh. The reason this gland is considered a sealed gateway is because it holds a dual key. One part biological, the other metaphysical. Physiologically, it governs immunity, the body's boundary against invasion. Metaphysically, it governs spiritual sovereignty, the soul's boundary against manipulation. That is why ancient traditions saw this region as the battleground between inner truth and outer conditioning. When the thymus is closed or suppressed, the individual becomes suggestible, weak-willed, and spiritually inert. He may follow rules, but he no longer creates. He may speak, he no longer expresses his will. He becomes a servant to symbols, no longer a master of them. This is not an accident of evolution. It is a design. For those in power, it has always been necessary to control, not just the mind of man, but his energy centers. The thymus is not governed by rational thought, it is governed by harmony, dissonance, and emotional coherence. When the energy field around the thymus is disturbed by constant fear, media manipulation, or an overload of artificial stimulation, the organ's higher function is shut down. And with it, the individual forgets that he was ever divine. He begins to seek outside of himself for what he once commanded within. The ancient builders knew this. In the mystery schools, the initiate was trained to reawaken the thymus through sound, breathwork, sacred geometry, and ritual. The chants were not simply for devotion. They were tonal activations designed to resonate with the gland and open its portal function. Word, that creates reality as spoken of in countless traditions, does not merely emerge from the throat. It is filtered through the thymic gateway, where intention and emotion meet. To manifest, to will something into being, the individual must first command the frequency from this center. Otherwise, his words are empty. His desires remain unmet. His rituals remain hollow. Even today, traces of this lost knowledge remain. When someone experiences profound grief or spiritual awakening, they often describe a pressure or expansion in the center of the chest. They don't know it, but it's the thymus, reacting, pulsing, trying to break the shell of suppression. Those who feel drawn to chant, to sing from the chest, to speak poetry aloud, are often unconsciously reactivating the thymus. This is not a superstition. It is the stirring of a portal that was sealed by design, and can only be reopened through conscious resonance. The world may call it pseudoscience because to acknowledge its true power would destabilize centuries of control. Modern manifestations are often spoken of in the language of convenience. Positive affirmations, vision boards, and shallow optimism sold as spiritual truth. But those who ruled in silence, those who shaped empires not with slogans but with symbols and unseen force, knew the bitter truth. Manifestation is not a game of hope, but a war of will. And this war is not waged outside in the physical world. It is orchestrated in the deep recesses of the human field, where quantum laws bend not to sentiment but to structure. The thymus gland, the forgotten node between breath and voice, between love and power, plays a central role in this orchestration. It does not create reality through blind emotion, but through directed frequency. And that frequency, when harmonized with intent, becomes command. Manifestation is not wishful thinking, it is architecture. And the thymus is the builder's most sacred tool. To grasp how manifestation works on a quantum level, we must understand that the universe is not built on objects, but on vibration. Every particle is in motion. Every form, however solid it may seem, is held together by fields of information and resonance. When a human being thinks, feels, and believes something deeply, he sends out a frequency. This is not metaphorical, but measurable. But there's a hierarchy to this signal. Thought alone is weak, easily distorted. Emotion alone is chaotic. Belief without embodiment is hollow. The thymus gland is the conductor that aligns these components into a singular wave, clear, directed, and potent. This gland, strategically placed between the heart and the throat, bridges the seat of emotional truth and the expression of will. When the thymus is active and resonant, it creates coherence between what one desires, what one feels, and what one speaks into existence. It synchronizes the body's electromagnetic field, creating a resonance pattern that can either attract or repel realities from the quantum field. This alignment requires control, not surrender. It requires strategy, not faith. One must will the signal into precision, not simply hope for divine coincidence. Ancient priests, magicians, and rulers understood this dynamic intimately. They did not chant to beg, they chanted to vibrate. They did not build pyramids for the dead, they built them to lock in frequencies that would amplify the body's internal field. Rituals were encoded systems of alignment. The thymus was not explicitly named, but it was targeted through symbols placed at chest level, geometric resonance chambers in temple design, and specific breathing patterns taught only to initiates. These were not aesthetic choices, they were control systems for reality. The average modern man, disconnected from this knowledge, believes he can manifest by repeating hollow affirmations. He lacks coherence, his mind wants one thing, his heart fears another, and his voice speaks lies to appear virtuous. The result is internal dissonance, an incoherent field. And in quantum law, incoherence does not attract, it fragments. His life reflects this fragmentation: scattered goals, unstable relationships, and chronic dissatisfaction masked by superficial pleasure. He is powerless not because he lacks faith, but because he lacks willful coherence. The thymus, if activated, change this, but society ensures it stays dormant. To activate quantum manifestation through will, one must first dominate their inner world, must be disciplined. Emotion must be refined. Speech must be intentional. This is not spiritual romanticism, it is warcraft. Every word spoken from the mouth passes through the thymic field, and if the gland is resonant, that word becomes charge, an energetic command that reshapes the field. But if the gland is weak or dissonant, the word becomes static, an impotent sound, easily absorbed by the noise of the external world. Breath is the first tool of control. The thymus responds to breath the way a sword responds to the hand that wields it. Shallow, rapid breathing fractures the field, weakens the gland's signal, and keeps one in a state of panic or distraction. Slow, deep, conscious breathing stabilizes the field, allowing energy to gather and focus. When this breath is combined with visualization and directed emotion, not scattered longing, but concentrated will, manifestation begins to occur not in months, but in moments. The shift is not gradual, it is magnetic. To live in a state of quantum manifestation is to understand that the world responds not to intention, but to authority. The thymus is the organ of that authority. When fully awakened, it vibrates with a field so coherent that the body becomes a beacon. Synchronicities are no longer rare, they are systematic. People respond differently. Obstacles dissolve. Paths open, not because of chance, but because the field around the individual is no longer passive, it is directive. It no longer waits for reality, it dictates it. In this way, Thymus is not a mystical curiosity, but a weapon. A tool of command, refined through silence, activated by breath, focused by will. Power cannot be shared with the masses, for it would destroy the systems built on obedience and victimhood. Only those with inner discipline, strategic mind, and ruthless focus can wield it. That is why the world distracts you, feeds you comfort, and tells you to externalize your desires. Because if you were to align your breath, thought, and voice through the thymus, you would not just influence your world. You would become its architect. In every ancient civilization that understood power beyond the sword, there existed a quiet reverence for Thoth, the ibis, headed god not of religion, but of control through knowledge. He was not worshipped as a distant deity, but revered as the master of frequencies, geometry, sacred language, and time manipulation. To the untrained eye, he appears as a myth. To the initiated, he is the eternal strategist who encoded a system of spiritual warfare beneath symbols, architecture, and bodily function. Thoth did not teach the masses, he taught rulers. And what he taught them was not how to pray for change, but how to command it, how to use the inner body, specifically the thymus gland, as a node of divine force, an amplifier of will, and a weapon of energetic domination. The ancients knew the world was not run by men, by fields, electromagnetic, psychic, and emotional. Thoth's genius was not in poetry or dogma, but in structuring these fields with mathematical exactness. He gave birth to the system of Hermetic law, a strategic framework governing polarity, rhythm, vibration, correspondence, and causality. These were not philosophical musings, they were battlefield maps. They revealed how reality could be shaped by those who understood alignment over strength, intention over emotion, and pattern over passion. And at the heart of this system was the human body, not as flesh and blood alone, but as a multi-dimensional weapon with various keys, ports, and gateways. The thymus was one of the most hidden and guarded. Why? Because it is the intersection point between the human will and divine command. The heart feels, the throat speaks, but the thymus transmits. In warfare, whether spiritual or psychological, whoever controls the frequency of a population controls its behavior. Thoth did not merely write spells, he encrypted geometries of power that could be activated through posture, breath, ritual, and inner resonance. His codes were not meant to inspire, they were meant to protect and empower those worthy of holding them. And in every formula he left behind, the body was central. The heart was the source of truth, yes, but the thymus was the transmitter, the amplifier, the energetic weapon that could repel attack, influence others, and bind thought into physical reality. Thoth's codes were often wrapped in allegory. He spoke of the feather of Maat, weighing against the heart, not to judge morality, but to reveal vibrational alignment. A heavy heart, burdened by guilt or fear, would collapse the thymic field, rendering the soul powerless in both life and death. But a light heart, balanced and coherent, would activate the thymic chamber, allowing the soul to ascend not just to afterlife, but to conscious command within this life. The weighing of the heart was not symbolic justice, it was energetic law. Every hieroglyph, every ritual, every sacred temple Thoth influenced was embedded with layers of tactical wisdom. The obelisks of Egypt, often dismissed as monuments, were conductors. They mimicked the spine. At the top was the capstone, representing the pineal gland, but at the midsection, hidden in proportion, was the thymic node. The great temples were built to resonate with the human form, and when initiates stood within them and chanted specific tones, the vibrations would trigger corresponding glands, particularly the thymus. These were activation chambers for the elite, the chosen few who would rule not by decree, but by frequency. Thoth also understood that spiritual warfare is not only about defense, but about influence. The thymus, once awakened, emits a coherent electromagnetic field that penetrates others. When two people speak, it is not only words that collide, it is fields. If one person's thymic field is weak, he becomes malleable. If the other's is strong, he becomes the architect of perception. Thoth's greatest gift, then, was the revelation that domination does not require violence. It requires energetic coherence. He taught that one can win battles before they begin, influence leaders without speaking, and bend circumstances by crafting the internal frequency field with absolute precision. And this process begins not in thought, but in activation of the thymus. The ritual garments worn by Egyptian high priests included gold pectorals that rested directly over the thymus gland. These were not mere ornaments. They were conductors, designed to enhance the energetic emissions of the wearer. The chants of Thoth, encoded in sacred texts, were specific phonetic frequencies aimed at thymic resonance. His followers were not spiritual in the modern sense. They were field tacticians, energetic architects, and psychological commanders. They knew that to master the thymus was to become a sovereign vessel of reality, bending force. In times of conflict, initiates of Thoth were trained to enter a state of breath, induced coherence, activating the thymus and aligning it with their intent. This allowed them to project a psychic field so strong that it disrupted the perception and coherence of enemies. Victory was not always visible. It was often subtle, unnoticed, but absolute. Entire wars were won in the silence of these energetic confrontations, where a trained thymic field overpowered the disorganized signals of the masses. This is why true rulers rarely shout. They emanate. Even the language Thoth created, hieroglyphs, was not a spoken alphabet, but a vibrational script. Every symbol was a charge. Every shape contained resonance that affected the thymic region of the reader or viewer. The spiritual warfare Thoth engaged in was total. It was not emotional. It was mathematical. It did not care for belief. It required alignment. And it was entirely centered on the human body as the field generator, the thymus as the shield and sword. Those who activate it today do not simply meditate. They do not merely seek peace. They enter the battlefield of energy with weaponized breath, laser-like intent, and the command codes of an ancient architect whose name was etched not in books, in vibration itself. Power is not seized in the outer world unless it is first resurrected in the inner empire. Every collapsing civilization, every fallen man, every forgotten ruler had one thing in common: they forfeited the throne within. The ancients, those who did not kneel before gods but walked among them, knew this: the inner realm is the true dominion, and all external conquest flows from its alignment. The thymus gland, once revered and now forgotten, was not a gland to them. It was the seat of invisible sovereignty. Its decay marked the beginning of internal ruin, and its resurrection the reawakening of one's dominion over reality itself. To restore this inner empire is not a task of comfort, but of strategy. A man cannot rule what he cannot feel, and he cannot feel if his internal systems are asleep. The thymus is the bridge between emotion and command, between intuitive perception and assertive expression. In its dormant state, the human being becomes a puppet of external forces: media, culture, trends, impulses, trauma. But when the thymus is reignited, a sovereign frequency is restored. This frequency is not passive. It becomes a gravitational force, drawing order from chaos, direction from confusion, power from passivity. This is not metaphor. This is electromagnetic law. Thoth understood that the great spiritual war was not waged between nations, but between signals, those who emit and those who absorb. When a man reclaims his thymus, he ceases to absorb the frequencies of others and begins to broadcast his own. This act is nothing short of resurrection. A dead man walks in obedience, in contradiction, in emotional chaos. But a resurrected man walks in coherence. His breath aligns, his thoughts sharpen, his field stabilizes, his vision crystallizes. He becomes a node of order in a world built on distraction. This resurrection is violent, not in the physical sense, but in the spiritual one. It is the violent uprooting of passivity, the surgical removal of internal noise. The thymus does not awaken with words alone. It requires confrontation. One must confront his emotional patterns, his contradictions, his habits of self-betrayal. Every unspoken truth weakens the gland. Every compromise of integrity distorts its signal. Every betrayal of one's own instinct collapses the field. The resurrection, then, is not a ritual but a regime. A regime of self-discipline, truth, telling, breath control, and energetic fortification. Only then does the field return to coherence. Only then does the inner empire rise. The thymus also holds memory, not mental memory, but energetic imprinting. It stores the vibrational residue of past choices, unresolved emotions, suppressed truths. When left unchecked, this accumulation calcifies the field, just as the pineal can be calcified by toxicity. The difference is the thymus calcifies not from poison, but from cowardice. Every time a man remains silent when he should speak, avoids when he should act, or conforms when he should lead, his inner empire decays. The throne rusts, the voice cracks, the breath shortens, his field loses its command. To resurrect this field, one must first cleanse it. This is done not by fantasy, but by focused presence. The thymus responds to rhythm, tone, and frequency. Specific vocal vibrations, when chanted in resonance with breath and posture, begin to clear the energetic debris. The ancient Egyptians had techniques for this. The Greeks encoded it in their Pythagorean harmonics. The Vedic seers transmitted it through seed sounds, but all of them pointed back to the same core understanding. The thymus is not a mechanical gland. It is an energetic bridge, and when cleansed, it reignites the sovereign signal of the individual. But cleansing is not enough. After the rust is removed, the field must be reinforced. This is where strategy begins. The man must begin to consciously build his frequency field through decisive acts of alignment. He must speak only what is true, act only in ways that strengthen his coherence, and breathe in a rhythm that signals to the thymus that he is once again king of his inner court. This is not performance, it is training. Every moment becomes a rep, every interaction a test. Will he revert to fragmentation, or will he remain aligned? The resurrected thymus rewards coherence with influence. People begin to obey not out of fear, but out of resonance. The world subtly shifts to mirror his frequency. Thoth's teachings concealed this process behind symbols. The ibis, the scroll, the pen, these were not literal tools. The scroll was the thymic script, the code of inner command. The pen was the breath, the tool of rewriting one's field. The ibis was the neck, the sacred curve of voice and truth. Together they formed the tride of resurrection, not of flesh, but of signal. A man who masters these becomes something rare in this age, not just awakened, but resurrected. He carries within him a field of sovereign command, and through this field, he reclaims territory not only in the outer world, but in time itself. The past no longer defines him. The future no longer owns him. He becomes the now, point of pure signal, broadcasting not desire, but decree. The resurrection of the thymus is not a spiritual luxury. It is the restoration of command. In an age where voices are many but signals are weak, where men scream but no longer influence, the return to this gland is not optional. It is imperative. For only through its activation does one return to the throne within, and from there, dictate the shape of the world without. The man who resurrects this gland no longer obeys fate. He writes in an age where illusion is sold as wisdom and obedience is mistaken for virtue. The resurrection of the thymus is not merely a metaphysical curiosity. It is a rebellion. You have now seen what was hidden in plain sight. The forgotten gland beneath your throat is not biology. It is command. It is the lost portal of manifestation, the energetic throne of the inner empire. Thoth, the ancient architect of frequency and form, did not speak to the masses. He encrypted his knowledge for rulers, for those prepared to see not just with the eyes, but with the field. The thymus was silenced for a reason. Its activation grants not belief but power, raw, quiet, unshakable power. Power to bend perception, power to radiate coherence, power to live without bowing. It is not found through mysticism, but through strategy. Not in wishing, but in the art of inner war. And now, you stand before that war with knowledge in your hand and resonance in your breath. The world will not tell you this. It will sedate you, distract you. It will tell you the heart is enough, that the mind is king, but neither can command reality without the transmitter. Without the thymus, you are a song with no speaker, a general with no troops. But with it awakened, you become untouchable, not because you hide, but because your field repels deception. You attract not chaos, but alignment. You no longer live inside the system, you override it. This is the forgotten art of quantum manifestation, not the child's game of vision boards and empty affirmations, but the ruler's science of energy, frequency, and strategic resonance. It is not for everyone, but for those who reclaim the throne within, who reforge the field, who speak from alignment and breathe with authority. There are no limits, only dominion, only decree. And now you know.